Right. So get this. We're going deep on Bitcoin today with like the ultimate Bitcoin bull, Michael Saylor.
Yeah, the CEO of MicroStrategy. They've basically bet the company on Bitcoin.
Exactly. And we've got these excerpts from a recent interview where he just lays out this wild vision for the future.
Yeah, Saylor's not afraid to make some pretty bold predictions.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to break down his thinking.
Yeah.
Look at, is there logic behind these predictions? What's the evidence? And try to give you a balanced perspective.
Always good to be a little skeptical.
For sure. And one of the big things he keeps hammering on is this idea that Bitcoin isn't just digital currency. It's like this whole other thing.
Right. He calls it digital capital.
Yeah, digital capital. Like, it's not just about buying stuff. He's comparing it to, like, digital real estate or gold.
Even better than that, he says.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely all in on Bitcoin. But I think that's a really key distinction. Like, it gets to the heart of how he sees Bitcoin fitting into the world.
Definitely. Think about it. You don't buy groceries with your house.
No, you don't.
So Saylor's saying Bitcoin isn't really about those everyday transactions.
It's for the big money.
Right. The serious long-term wealth.
Right.
Where the institutions and the ultra-wealthy park their fortunes.
It's like a digital vault for the global elite.
You could say that. And to understand why he's so convinced, we need to look at what MicroStrategy has actually done.
Yeah, they've put their money where their mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
They've raised billions of dollars to buy Bitcoin.
Using a pretty unconventional strategy, they're using debt to buy Bitcoin.
Wait, so explain that. How does that even work?
Basically, they're taking advantage of their corporate structure to issue debt, essentially corporate bonds.
Yeah.
And then using those funds to buy Bitcoin.
So they're like a leveraged Bitcoin play?
Yeah, it amplifies their exposure to the price movements.
Okay.
So it's high risk, high reward.
Super high risk. What if the price of Bitcoin tanks?
There's definitely risk involved. But Saylor believes the potential gains from Bitcoin's long-term appreciation are so huge that it's worth the risk.
He's thinking long-term.
Oh, yeah. He's not worried about the day-to-day fluctuations. He's betting that Bitcoin is still in its early stages and its price is going to keep climbing.
It's like a hold on for dear life strategy, HODL.
Exactly. And so far, it's actually been working pretty well for them.
Their Bitcoin holdings have outperformed the S&P 500.
Right. They've basically become like a Bitcoin treasury for investors.
Interesting. So even if you're not totally sold on Saylor's vision, you got to admit, their strategy has been pretty successful.
At least so far. But he doesn't stop there. He's predicting this whole crypto renaissance driven by a friendlier regulatory environment.
You're talking about an explosion of digital securities and tokens changing how we trade and own everything.
Like, imagine owning a piece of Apple stock right on your phone, trading it instantly, even on a weekend, with complete control over your assets.
Okay, that does sound kind of cool.
It could revolutionize not just the stock market, but real estate, art, music, anything you can think of.
Tokenize everything.
Exactly. That's where his vision gets really expansive. He's not just focused on Bitcoin. He's looking at the broader potential of blockchain technology to disrupt entire industries.
And speaking of disruption, Saylor had some interesting things to say about the red wave election that didn't happen. He seemed to think it would have been huge for Bitcoin.
Yeah. He believes that a red wave victory, with its emphasis on smaller government and deregulation, would create a much more favorable environment for Bitcoin businesses.
He's a fan of the free market approach.
Definitely. He saw it as a potential turning point for the industry.
He even talked about the possibility of a U.S. strategic Bitcoin stockpile.
Yeah.
Like, the government would actually hold Bitcoin as a reserve asset.
Yeah.
Like gold.
It's a pretty wild concept.
Yeah, it suggests that Bitcoin could reach a status similar to gold, be a key part of central bank reserves around the world.
It's a bold prediction.
Saylor doesn't do small predictions.
So even though the red wave didn't materialize, it's clear that Saylor sees a strong connection between the political landscape and the future of Bitcoin.
He thinks a more hands-off approach from regulators would be a game changer.
It would unlock a wave of innovation, he says.
And that brings us to the question of regulation.
Right. How would that actually play out? What would it mean for banks, institutions, everyday investors?
Lots to unpack there. And that's what we'll be digging into in the next part of our deep dive.
So, we've been talking about Michael Saylor and his bold predictions about Bitcoin, but I think it's worth taking a step back and asking, what does this all mean for the average person?
Right, because sometimes it feels like this whole Bitcoin thing is happening in this, exclusive financial club.
Yeah, exactly.
But Saylor seems to think it actually has the potential to impact everyone's financial future.
He really does. He argues that Bitcoin offers this unique opportunity for wealth creation, especially for people who feel like the traditional system is rigged against them.
He was talking about how, before he discovered Bitcoin, he was kind of struggling.
Yeah, he felt like he was working hard but not getting ahead.
And then Bitcoin came along, and it was like this huge light bulb moment.
It totally changed his perspective. And he thinks it could be that same kind of game changer for others, too.
But, I mean, it's important to be realistic, right? That
Yeah.
Bitcoin is still a very volatile asset. It's not like some magical get-rich-quick scheme.
Definitely not. It's important to do your research, understand the risks, and, only invest what you can afford to lose.
So you're not saying I should cash out my retirement fund and go all in on Bitcoin tomorrow?
Probably not the best idea. We always want to be clear that we're not giving financial advice here.
Of course.
Mhm.
Consult a professional before making any major financial decisions. But let's say I am interested in learning more. Where's a good place to start?
That's a great question. The whole world of digital assets can feel pretty overwhelming at first.
It is. It's like a whole new language.
Yeah, there's a lot of jargon and complex concepts, but there are tons of resources out there to help you get up to speed.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, you've got educational websites, online courses, even podcasts like this one. The key is to start with the basics.
Okay, so start with the basics.
Understand the underlying technology of blockchain. Then you can gradually explore different aspects of the digital asset ecosystem.
So I don't need to become like a blockchain whiz overnight.
Not at all. Take it one step at a time. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's good advice, because I definitely feel like I'm still at the beginner level. But going back to Saylor's vision for a second, he talked about how certain political shifts, like a red wave election, could have really sped up Bitcoin adoption. How would that actually work?
Well, he believes that a more favorable regulatory environment would encourage businesses to embrace Bitcoin.
So less red tape, more Bitcoin.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Saylor argues that excessive regulation stifles innovation. He thinks a more hands-off approach would allow the Bitcoin industry to flourish.
He also mentioned something about banks starting to custody Bitcoin. What did he mean by that?
Right now, most banks are pretty hesitant to get involved with Bitcoin, partly because of the regulatory uncertainty. But Saylor thinks that with more supportive regulations, banks would be more willing to offer Bitcoin custody services.
So it's like having a Bitcoin savings account.
You can think of it that way. It would make it much easier for people to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin.
That would be a pretty big shift. But I know there are still a lot of Bitcoin skeptics out there. People who think it's a bubble, a fad, something that's going to crash and burn eventually.
Skepticism is healthy. It's always smart to question new technologies and not just buy into the hype.
Right. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
But it's also important to keep an open mind and not dismiss something just because it's unfamiliar or challenges the status quo.
So don't hate on Bitcoin just because you don't get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bitcoin has been around for over a decade now, and it's shown remarkable resilience. It's survived multiple crashes and come back stronger each time. It's a technology that deserves to be taken seriously.
Okay, I'm starting to see why Saylor's so passionate about this. He sees Bitcoin as more than just an investment. It's like a potential solution to some of the world's biggest problems.
That's a good way to put it. He believes that Bitcoin can help address issues like inflation, wealth inequality, financial censorship.
Big issue.
Huge issues. He sees it as a tool for empowering individuals and creating a more equitable financial system.
It's a pretty grand vision.
It is, but he also acknowledges that there's still a lot of work to be done. He talked about the need for what he calls a crypto renaissance,
A crypto renaissance.
where we develop a sound, ethical, economic, and technical framework for digital assets.
So it's not enough to just embrace Bitcoin or any other digital asset.
Mm.
We need to think carefully about how these technologies are integrated into society.
Exactly. We need clear rules and guidelines to ensure responsible use.
So it's about finding the right balance between innovation and regulation.
Precisely. We need to encourage innovation, but also protect consumers and maintain stability.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we even start creating this framework? It seems like a massive undertaking.
It's definitely a complex challenge, but I think it begins with open dialogue and collaboration. We need to bring together experts from different fields, technology, finance, law, ethics, to have a thoughtful conversation about the future of digital assets.
So it's not just about the coders and the investors. It's about getting everyone to the table.
Absolutely. We need a wide range of perspectives to ensure that we create a framework that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
It's interesting how Saylor keeps comparing Bitcoin to gold. He sees it as a superior form of digital gold.
Yeah, that's a common analogy. And it's useful for understanding Bitcoin's potential as a store of value, Gold has been a valuable asset for centuries, but it's physical, it's difficult to transport, and it's susceptible to confiscation.
Right. You can't just like email someone some gold.
Exactly. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is digital. It's easily transferable, and it's highly resistant to censorship.
So it's like gold 2.0.
In a way, yes. But it's important to remember that Bitcoin is still a relatively new technology. Its long-term value remains to be seen.
It's still an experiment in many ways.
But it's an experiment that's capturing global attention.
And as Saylor pointed out, certain political shifts could really accelerate its adoption.
He believes that a more supportive political environment would create the ideal conditions for Bitcoin to thrive.
He even talked about the possibility of a U.S. strategic Bitcoin stockpile. Imagine the U.S. government holding Bitcoin as a reserve asset alongside gold.
That would be a huge turning point.
It would be a major validation of Bitcoin's legitimacy.
And a strong signal to the rest of the world that digital assets are here to stay.
But it's important to remember that this is still just a prediction.
Right. Whether it becomes reality is yet to be determined.
Okay, so we've got this potential future where Bitcoin is widely adopted. Banks offer Bitcoin custody services, and even governments hold Bitcoin as a reserve asset.
It's a very different world than the one we live in today.
It would be a significant transformation.
But as with any technological advancement, there will be challenges.
Of course.
We need to be prepared to address issues like security, privacy, and regulation as the digital asset ecosystem continues to evolve.
Right, it's not going to be all smooth sailing.
But Saylor seems confident that we can overcome these challenges and create a better future with Bitcoin.
He's definitely an optimist. But as we've discussed, it's important to approach this new world of digital assets with a healthy dose of both caution and excitement.
Exactly. Do your research, understand the risks, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose. But also stay curious, keep learning, and be open to the possibilities.
Good advice. The future of finance is being written as we speak.
And it's up to all of us to participate in shaping it.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Michael Saylor's predictions about Bitcoin and the future of finance. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to this idea of Bitcoin as digital capital.
Yeah, that's really at the core of his whole philosophy, isn't it?
It seems like it. He's not just talking about Bitcoin as a way to buy stuff. He's saying it's something much bigger than that.
Right. He sees it as this foundational asset for building long-term wealth, like a digital version of real estate or gold.
So you're saying it's not about replacing the dollar for your daily expenses?
No, it's more about like storing and preserving wealth over generations.
Like a digital inheritance you can pass down to your kids.
Exactly. Saylor believes that Bitcoin's scarcity and divisibility and security make it the perfect tool for protecting your wealth from things like inflation.
But if everyone's just hoarding Bitcoin, wouldn't that make it less useful as a currency?
That's a good question. And it's something that's been debated a lot within the Bitcoin community.
So how can it be both a store of value and a medium of exchange?
Well, Saylor acknowledges that Bitcoin's price volatility can be an obstacle to its use in everyday transactions. But he thinks that as the market matures and that volatility decreases, Bitcoin will become more practical for everyday use.
So it's like we need more people using Bitcoin for its price to stabilize, but we also need a stable price for more people to start using it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But Saylor believes that Bitcoin's inherent value as digital capital will ultimately drive its adoption.
He's got a lot of faith in Bitcoin, that's for sure.
He does. He sees it as this groundbreaking innovation with the potential to totally revolutionize the financial system.
I get why he's so excited about it. But honestly, it still feels like this whole thing is happening in a parallel universe. Like it hasn't really touched my everyday life yet.
I think a lot of people feel that way. But Saylor argues that Bitcoin's impact will eventually be felt by everyone.
He compares it to the early days of the internet.
Right, something that seemed niche and technical at first, but ended up transforming every aspect of our lives.
So he's saying Bitcoin is like the internet of money.
Exactly. He believes it will have that same kind of transformative effect, creating new opportunities and disrupting traditional power structures.
But the internet took a while to go mainstream. Are we talking decades before we see the full impact of Bitcoin?
It's hard to say for sure. But Saylor thinks things are moving faster than people realize. He points to the growing institutional interest in Bitcoin as a sign that things are starting to shift.
Like when BlackRock, the world's biggest asset manager, started investing in Bitcoin.
Yeah, that was a big deal. It's a signal that mainstream finance is starting to take Bitcoin seriously.
Okay, so let's say I'm convinced I want to get in on the action. What's my first step?
The most important thing is to educate yourself. Take some time to learn about Bitcoin, how it works, the potential risks.
Don't just jump in head first.
Exactly. There are lots of great resources out there, websites, videos, podcasts. Just do your research.
And once I've done my homework, what's next?
Well, then you can start exploring different ways to acquire Bitcoin. You can buy it on exchanges, use a Bitcoin ATM, even earn it by accepting it as payment for goods or services.
So there are a lot of different options.
Yeah, the best approach for you will depend on your individual circumstances and your risk tolerance.
Makes sense. Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. It feels like we're on the verge of something big.
It's an exciting time to be following this space. The future of finance is being written right now.
And it's up to all of us to decide what that future looks like. So as we wrap up here, what's the key takeaway you want listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important message is to stay informed. This is a rapidly evolving landscape. It has the potential to change our lives in profound ways. So whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting to explore the space, be cautious, do your research, and be open to the possibilities.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin. And keep exploring the ever-evolving world of knowledge.